Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, a show that really rolls up the sleeves and we put the boxing gloves on. And usually we're having just a fun time. But I'm Robin.
Usually we're just.
I'm having a good time right now. And across town is my pugilistic partner in crime, John Jurisic, the Croatian sensation. And John, again, a very busy week.
Yeah, it sure is. You know, we generally do just have a good time, don't we? But we are ready to rumble, Rock and Robin, this week. Boy, are we ever.
We're going to rumble. And John, I want to start off with a comment about what's going on with Pierre Poilievre, who is drawing huge crowds across the country, including on Vancouver Island. Get a load of this. Huge crowd out in Nanaimo. There was a huge crowd in Sydney. Big crowds right across the country. Pierre Poilievre is touching a nerve. And you think, well, Nanaimo, that's kind of a working town. That's the reputation. A lot of mill guys up there, a lot of industry guys up there. What are they doing supporting a guy like Pierre Poilievre? He's a conservative, isn't he? Well, you know, it's a little déjà vu-ish. This same sort of thing happened back in the 1990s with Preston Manning. And he came across Western Canada. He said the West wants in, and people got worked up. They thought there's people in Ottawa, there's people in Ivory Towers, kind of spelling out how ordinary Canadians have to live. And people said, I don't want that. And suddenly we had places like Nanaimo and Port Alberni became hotbeds for the Reform Party movement. And you have to wonder, is this happening all over again? Are people getting a little bit fed up with people in Ivory Towers saying, this is how you should live, these are the rules you should live by, these are the standards we expect you to follow? And people are saying, wait a minute, that's not necessarily where I want to go. And maybe Pierre Poilievre is tapping into that. We'll have to see. I think he's going to get the leadership of the Conservatives. Whether he can defeat the Liberals in the next federal election, we shall see. But getting big crowds like that, you have to take your hat off to a strategy that's really working, John. And geez, everybody's in a feisty mood these days.
Man, are they ever. And boy, do we have a big bag of viewer mail. Let's take a look. I just feel like it's exploded. I don't know where that's all coming from, but thank you to our viewers. First up, we've been talking about Mount Doug Park, now becoming Pecos Park after Saanich Council made that announcement in the name of reconciliation, Robin. As I said last week, who isn't supportive of reconciliation? There isn't a person in Canada who is not supporting reconciliation with our First Nations, and we all believe we need to give them every economic opportunity to step ahead and share in our nation's great bounty. But come on, I am not crazy about changing the name of one of Victoria's largest landmarks. Come on. Here's what some of our viewers had to say about this. Very angry. Ron writes, change the name to what? Some word nobody could pronounce or spell? And Jamie writes, what? Should we change the name Canada as well? You know, of course, Robin, just a reminder, historical lesson here. The name Canada originated as an Iroquois word, which meant village or settlement. And thank you, Paul, for that reminder. Thank you. I mean, we should all know this. Of course, we already have lots of well-known Indigenous place names on the island, like Saanich, Esquimalt, Nanaimo, Cowichan, Machosen, Souk, all Indigenous-based names.
It's not a radical idea. And really from the beginning, I have been saying that there's nothing wrong with having our place names, our traditional place names. We've been here. The society we live in today has been here for a couple of hundred years. I think there's nothing wrong with remembering and honoring our collective past as well as the past of the Indigenous. We could have one name and below it or above it, the other name. I don't have a problem with that. We just don't need to lose names, I think, at this point. And I don't hear the First Nations saying we should do that either. And also, Johnny, in terms of letters that have come in from viewers, we certainly touched the nerve when we had Casey Edge in from the residential home builders.
Did we ever?
Talking about banning natural gas in new construction by 2025. And he certainly made it clear that he thought it was wrong-headed, but here's what our viewers had to say. Dorothy writes, ban on natural gas? Are you guys totally in la-la land?
It's great. And Ian writes about the gas ban. No worries. The low IQ libtards running this town should be history by 2025. Please keep those letters coming in. We love the input, okay? Whether you agree with us or not. It's great to get the pulse of the community. We've also heard plenty of people upset about the ferry delays. Man, oh man, just so much anger about so much stuff. It's great to vent. So here we are. Even I'm venting, especially in a creative way. And speaking of creative, the man with the giant thesaurus is running for Victoria Council again.
Again and again and again. Chris Coleman. Chris Coleman is coming back. He's riding his horse back into the fray of Victoria Council. You know, he was on council for 19 years, and he's now returning. He's now returning. Veterans like Charlene Thornton-Joe and Jeff Young stepped off, and the new player as the mayor will be in place. Don't know who that's going to be, but Judith Coleman has agreed to let her husband out of yet another burdensome task of looking after her in their retirement so he can be on council, possibly for 4 years at City Hall. We know Chris well. He's a principled guy. He's a great guy. We wish him all the best. And I know we're not out to sort of publicize favorites, but we do kind of like Chris Coleman.
You know, we've known Chris, you and I, for a long time, so how can we not wish him good luck? Obviously, therefore, good luck to all the candidates. A reminder, if you're a civic candidate and you'd like a short platform on the show, 1 minute, please contact us and we'll get you on the program in the weeks leading up to the election. I'm quite sure this will heat up post-Labor Day. But now, once again, time to shift to our central theme of this week's program, the Ukraine.
Absolutely, Johnny, and we all are watching this big offensive going on in Kherson. It's the first counteroffensive by the Ukrainians, and it looks like they're being very effective against the Russians, who don't have the morale, don't seem to have the training, and don't have the high-tech weapons that the Ukrainians are getting from the West, from NATO allies, particularly the United States, and Canada has participated as well. Yeah. And, you know, it's really something. The support that we're seeing on Vancouver Island is really inspiring. We have 451 refugees from Ukraine living on Vancouver Island. A lot of them are up in central Vancouver Island, the Nanaimo region. A recent rally was held that gave us a chance at the legislature to talk to some of the people directly involved in this whole refugee situation.
They are doing as well as you would expect. People have been very successful on the whole at getting jobs. Finding housing is harder, of course, although I've also been surprised at how generous people have been opening up their homes, opening up vacant basement suites. And I would like to say, this is Elena, and you were asking me about how Ukrainians are doing. I think Elena is an example of a woman who is doing extremely well given the circumstances.
How long has Elena been here for?
You've been here
4 months. 4 months.
4 months. I'm sorry, I hope you don't mind I pulled you onto camera. Elena's a single mom, but she's here, she's working, she's got a place, and has been welcomed into the Victoria community.
So Elena, are you hoping to go home soon, or what are you feeling right now about being so far away from Ukraine?
It's difficult to explain because it's a nice place. I say because I arrived with my daughter, but my family stay in Ukraine now. That's why it's hard because I love my country. I won't come back because I want live with my family, and I like my city, Kharkiv. It's a really beautiful city. That's why now we're safe. It's important for us, but I hope war maybe stopped soon. I really hope, because my parents stay in this country.
Which is a
my
worry,
country.
a worry.
Yes, of course.
But you must be very, very pleased to see so many Canadians who are out here supporting you, people
Yes.
from right across the country.
All the time, people who surround me, people support me, help me all the time. I just ask, and people all the time help me, give me advice, sometimes hug, but it's really important.
No one expected Ukraine to be as strong as they are, but that being said, as a Ukrainian, we are very stubborn people. And I think when the entire world is supporting you and looking on what you're doing and saying we are fighting for the freedom of the planet, not just of Ukraine, it's inspiring.
Great to see local support, Robin. I mean, honestly, wow. And after so much time, you know, because sometimes this stuff fizzles out, it's not. I know you and I have been cheering on this Ukrainian effort and support for Ukrainian population and refugee. Yeah, excellent. Right on. Right on. We're also big fans of our next guest. Regular viewers of the show have seen Dr. Chris Kilford, a retired senior military attaché and diplomat, on our show many times. He teaches at Royal Roads. He is the president of the Victoria chapter of the Canadian International Council, a Victoria branch. He is just back from a holiday in Europe, where he also squeezed in, I don't know how you squeeze in this in a holiday, but anyway, he did. He squeezed in several military meetings. He has lots to say about the situation in Ukraine. Let's zoom him in.
And now joining us once again in the Victoria Rumble Room is our analyst on what's going on in the Ukraine, Chris Kilford. So nice to have you back.
Thanks, guys. As always, I'm delighted to be a part of what you're doing.
Well, and we're delighted you have time for us. You're just back from a trip to Europe. You've been in the Baltic. You were in Turkey, Belgium, the UK. So you've had a chance during a holiday to also do a little bit of snooping around and find out what's going on the ground in that part of the world. And Chris, what I needed to ask you about was Ukraine has just celebrated its National Independence Day, 31 years since it got from under the foot of the Soviet Union, and it's 6 months now since the Russians have invaded. Why is Ukraine still standing? It seems Russia is sagging.
Yeah, 31 years. That's remarkable by itself, the passage of time that we have seen since the end of the Cold War as we know it, although I would argue that we've just come we're back full circle. And yes, I mean, Ukraine is still hanging on. In fact, I wouldn't even say hanging on is the right term. I think that what we have seen in the last few months is the initiative passing over to the Ukrainians as the Russians have become stalled. And we're seeing that in the way that the Ukrainians are very masterfully targeting Russian operational and strategic assets, and the way in which Russia is only able to respond, which is by largely targeting civilians. And what it really shows is that Ukraine has tremendous support from the West. There's no doubt in my mind that there are special forces from many countries on the ground in Ukraine, and our intelligence services assisting the Ukrainians, and the Russians just simply don't have that sort of help on their side, and so that's why we're seeing the initiative pass to Ukraine.
I have a question for you, but first some context, some numbers to throw around here. The Americans have just announced that they're adding $3 billion in military aid. Boris Johnson, the English Prime Minister, visits Ukraine once again. The British Foreign Secretary says 80,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded over 6 months. Meantime, on the other side, that's what they're saying anyway, the Russian foreign minister claims that Russia is in fact fighting NATO. He pegs Ukrainian losses at 150,000 and says military operations are all being planned out of London and Washington. I get there's a propaganda machine on the Russian side, likely on the Ukrainian side. Give us who do we believe? What's really going on here, Chris?
Yeah, I think both sides are looking to influence their audiences. So if you're in Russia, obviously it's not going well, but you need to maintain the public's support. And so you pass around good economic figures and good news and so forth. And you cut off the Russian public from any sort of Western sources of information. So no more Facebook or YouTube or anything like that. And limiting or stopping or trying to stop access to people, using VPNs to get news and so forth. So that's that audience. But then you come over to the other side of the house, and Ukraine has done a masterful job of rallying the West. The West often gets distracted, and I haven't really seen a better case of a country galvanizing so many countries to come in and support them. It's absolutely amazing that they're able to do that. Now, the numbers, yes, look, all good news for Ukraine, generally speaking, but they have been losing soldiers. They have millions of refugees, civilians are being killed. And so you have that aspect to it. Now, who's doing what to whom? Yeah, let's be clear. Most of the Western world, Japan and others have rallied behind Ukraine. They are providing weapons and money and technical advice, tactical advice, operational, strategic advice, intelligence, and so forth. There's no question. And if Russia might say, for example, that the operations are being planned out of London or Washington or even Ottawa, for that matter, there's a grain of truth there that the Ukrainians are receiving tremendous support. But at the end of the day, the fellow or the young lady holding the rifle is Ukrainian, and the people around the table with the maps and figuring out what they're going to do are largely Ukrainians, and there may be some folks there helping them, but they are the ones fighting and dying. And if not for their resolve, this would have been over a long time ago. So this is a Ukrainian fight with some important help, but let's be clear, this is a Ukrainian fight.
Now, the Russians, the United States sources say that the Russians have lost over 12,000 pieces of major military equipment. We're talking about helicopters, guns, tanks, and trucks. Now, we've talked to you about this before. Apparently, this is worth $16 billion to the Russian economy, and you've talked about the Russian economy not being as large, actually, as the Canadian economy. It's not like this is some behemoth of economic prosperity. No. And you said they needed a quick war. When this war broke out 6 months ago, we had you on. You said this better happen quickly for them because it's going to be very difficult for them to sustain a long conflict. They just don't have the supply chain. They don't have the economy. Has anything changed in your mind on that prediction?
No, not at all. Perhaps the fact that they are hanging in as long as they have. I don't think there's any option for them. Russia just can't leave. It would be a national embarrassment of massive proportions, and so that's not going to happen. So that means they pull in everything they've got on this fight. Now, yes, exactly this. The economy in Russia is smaller. The Russians have done a very good job of misleading Western analysts by publishing rosy economic figures, but holding back on the real key information about the state of the economy. And sanctions take time. And also countries will help Russia when they can get around sanctions. And so sanctions take time and don't work overnight. But the long-term prognosis, I would think, for Russia is simply not good. The fact is, Ukraine has friends. Democracies, as messy as they are, at the end of the day, work together when there's a crisis. And in the case of Russia, Russia has no friends. I often think of Putin as just, he's treading water, and he's looking to support from other countries where the leaders there are also treading water, just trying to stay one step ahead of, let's say, economic collapse, like in the case of Turkey, or internal problems as we see in China, or having to turn to countries like Iran for help. These are the folks that will be your fair weather friends. But when push comes to shove, they'll let you drown. So Russia is very much on its own, whereas Ukraine is seeing, I think, the real value of what it means to be a democracy. And don't get me wrong, I mean, democracies, they have many issues, but I can't think of a better way of running the show, so to speak, and running countries. And I think in the long term, Ukraine will come out of this so much further ahead.
Chris, a couple of questions here. They're quite large, but anyway, they're worth now investigating. So beyond the real presence within Ukraine, you've just returned from Latvia, I understand, where you've spent some time with Canadian NATO troops who are deployed there. Is there real concern that Russians might attack a NATO country at this point? And the second question, which I hope is a simple one, which is no. At what point does Putin get desperate enough to access his nuclear arsenal, therefore, yet again, attacking NATO countries?
Yeah, so I was very, very privileged and honored to have an opportunity to visit our troops in Latvia. I did ask the Canadian Armed Forces for permission to visit. I quite frankly thought that it might amount to a quick briefing and that would be it, but they put on what amounted to a full day program, and I had a chance to meet with our battle group commander, the task force commander, both the outgoing and the incoming. It reminded me of my Cold War days when I was stationed in Germany, and it was like we had picked up Lahr and Baden-Solingen and moved them about 1,600 kilometers eastward, and we were now there we are in Latvia, just outside of Riga. Our folks are part of this. In fact, they're leading this very large battle group made up of multiple NATO nations, and so it's a real delight to see NATO pulling together in this one organization, and the plans are to expand it. I mean, I had a briefing on the infrastructure there, and they are going to be expanding Canada's presence at Camp Adazi. So very professional troops, terrific equipment. People that think the battle group there and the troops we have there in Latvia, that they're just some sort of sacrificial tripwire. Well, it's one hell of a tripwire, I have to tell you. There's a lot of firepower in that organization, and the Latvian Armed Forces are very professional as well. I just came away so impressed with our folks, and also to see that in good Canadian fashion, we also had a Tim Hortons there. So, wow. But look, this is all real, though. I mean, those troops are there. They rotate every 6 months for the most part. They train very hard with one mission in mind, and that's, of course, Russia attacking. And to answer your question about, Russia, what might Russia do with NATO? I mean, I think this would be a bridge too far. They can't even handle they can't even handle the Crimea and the Donbass. I mean, to imagine that they would be able to rally enough firepower right now to even put a dent into the side of NATO is, I just can't see it. And in the case of nuclear weapons, you'd have to think that in the Kremlin there are still perhaps a few checks and balances that exist that would prevent something like that from happening. Because I think the thing there is, once you do turn to nuclear weapons, if Russia was to do that, that is the end of Russia as we would know it today. I think that it would actually lead to potentially the disintegration of the state of Russia as we know it today. The pushback, what would happen to Moscow, the fact that there are many parts of Russia even today, Dagestan, Chechnya, all that. People may not want to be a part of whatever Russia is in the future. So this would be risking it all, and in fact, it wouldn't be a risk because there's no risk, there's no chance of you winning. This is the fact. So Russia's got itself into a terrible, terrible mess thanks to one person. And the only real way out of it now for him is to simply to head home, really, to head home, and maybe hang on to the Crimea and a bit of the Donbass, but to pack it up. But look, getting to that point for him, I don't know how many more Russians have to die until somebody takes some action against him. I don't know.
So, Chris, we're happily moving around the globe with you because you've been happily moving around the globe for us. So this is great. We get to cover lots of different terrain. So we're going to flip from Latvia now down a little further south. You were in Turkey as well. And Turkey, in a former life, you were a military attaché in Turkey. So you know that terrain very well. And it seems to me the Turks now are trying to play the role of honest broker. There was a time there when it seemed that they were cozying up a little close to the Russians, more than I would have liked to have seen. But now they seem to be reaching out. They're trying to be the broker for the grain shipments. Now there is grain being safely shipped through Istanbul to the Middle Eastern markets. Do you think that Turkey is indeed now, if it wasn't before, a Ukrainian ally? And if that's the case, is it because they suspect the Russians are going to lose this thing?
Oh, that's such a really complex question.
I thought I'd give it a shot.
No. Again, I was delighted to have an opportunity to head to Ankara for a few days and sit down with our defense attaché there and some journalists that I know, and also to be invited inside the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs to sit down for about 90 minutes with two of their senior diplomats to just talk about what is happening from Turkey's perspective. I think when I look at Turkey, kudos for restricting access through the Bosphorus for warships. You are looking after your own interests, helping the Ukrainians, providing them drones and armored vehicles and getting the grain deal all sorted out. But at the same time, busily trading with Russia, inviting Russian tourists to come to Turkey, assisting them in that as well. Trading, as I mentioned, as much as you can, making up for the shortfalls that were coming from the European Union, whether that's vegetables or fruits or anything like that. So they've got a foot in both camps. And quite frankly, it upsets Europeans and Washington and so forth. That's another issue. So I see Turkey desperately trying to sort out their own situation, which means having to do all sorts of side deals. I would imagine that in the presidential offices, it's a real nightmare trying to keep track of everything right now. So yes, well done, Turkey, in some respects, but in other respects, they're not really helping the overall cause, which is to get Russia out of Ukraine.
Chris, now we're going to switch around the world to Vancouver Island, where we are here, sure. Getting closer to home with each question. Obviously, a lot of folks on Vancouver Island are of Ukrainian descent, also within Canada. Many more are strong supporters of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Yet another rally at the legislature recently. There doesn't seem to be any kind of lack of enthusiasm or slowing down of activity about supporting refugees and sending money and supports to Ukraine. What do you make of this sustained support when we're so very distant from the battleground?
Yeah, I wouldn't actually say we're distant from the battleground. We're on the front lines in a sense, because of course we have a huge diaspora here. We now have lots of Ukrainian refugees, so we're sort of living this every single day. And we have to give full credit to President Zelensky for his ability to reach out to so many people, to tailor his messages to particular audiences. And in the case of Canada, it's worked tremendously well, and of course the rest of the world. So what we did see in the last few months, as I said earlier on, is the initiative passing to Ukraine. And when that happens, when that tipping point happens, people begin to realize that, hey, this isn't actually hopeless. In those early days, we thought it was hopeless. Poor old Ukraine, big Russia, be over pretty quickly. Not in the first 3 days, but give it a month, give it 2 months, give it 3 months. And then all of a sudden you get to a bit of a tipping point and you start to say, wait a minute, they may not actually win the war, but they may win the war, something like that. and we can help them do that. So the initiative passes to not only the Ukrainian people in Ukraine, but people everywhere that are supporting them. So I think that's really key, and that's what we're seeing. And I don't expect it to stop, because I quite frankly think the Russians are out of ideas. And if somebody could come along and give them a face-saving way to get out of the situation, they would probably grab onto it. And that's where countries possibly like Turkey, as much as we get annoyed with Turkey at times for being in both camps, it's a country like Turkey that has the communication open to both sides and could possibly find a way out of this. I can't think of anything myself right now, but something may show itself at some point.
Always fascinating to hear from Chris Kilford. And, John, after we did this interview, he spoke at length about the morale of the Canadian troops who are training in Latvia and are working in this NATO group. And they're very, very proactive, and morale is extremely high. And they've also been doing a lot of training with Ukrainians who are coming north to the Baltic to learn how to manage those big guns that Canada has sent them to help them defend themselves against the Russians. And according to Chris, the soldiers were extremely emotional when talking about the Ukrainians. They said they were a little bit disheveled. Their uniforms were a wide variety. Some of them were even wearing running shoes, but they were determined. These were brave, determined people who were going to defend their country no matter what, and were showing tremendous courage, and it rubbed off on the Canadians. Some of them said, I want to get down there. I want to support Ukraine. And, I admire this, John. I think it's great that Canadians want to get behind the Ukrainian effort, send weapons, send food, send support the refugees, but let's stay out of that conflict for now. And, I think that this is something to be following with great pride as a Canadian, but as a citizen of the world. And we go now from the world to Victoria politics, John. We're going to touch on Victoria politics for a moment.
Absolutely, Robin. Well said, by the way. Completely support your sentiments about Ukraine and Canadian efforts to support Ukraine. But locally, what is going on with local municipal elections that are soon, within 6 weeks of happening? We've got a couple of significant players who stepped up to run for Victoria Council. First of all, Gary Beyer, a downtown business owner who's actually considered running for mayor in 2018. Guess what? He's thrown his hat in for a seat on the council. Gary is very concerned about the deterioration of the city. Join the crowd. Street crime, crumbling infrastructure is a big concern. He believes the Victoria Police is underfunded and plans to be a strong voice for business. Well done. Well done. I hope that those sentiments transpire for him. Good luck to Gary. Another familiar face has decided to run for council, Robin.
That's right. Steve Orchardon has decided he's going to throw his hat in the ring. And Steve Orchardon was once the NDP MLA for Victoria Hillside, before that at the helm of the BC Labour Council. And I've heard that Steve has been really thinking about this for a while. I've also heard him speak recently. He spoke on the BC doctor shortage, and very eloquently. It reminded me that it's really important to have experienced people on council. Chris Coleman's running again. Now it's going to be Steve Orchardon, and I think he could really add a valuable, balanced voice. Most recently, he appeared at the Missing Middle public hearings, didn't mince words about this current outgoing council.
This Missing Middle proposal is a profound change in community planning and zoning, and in real terms is a blanket zoning change to residential neighborhoods. I am extremely concerned about this, and that is why I'm here today. I do not support this initiative that is being brought forward by this council. I am disheartened, disgusted, and profoundly disappointed by this initiative and other collective actions you have taken. I find myself no longer having faith or trust in this council. I have substantial experience in governance, and I do recognize from experience that change is a constant, and there are always unintended consequences in decision-making. That is why change needs to be a slow and thoughtful process, not knee-jerk flavor-of-the-day change. This council has a record of flavor-of-the-day policies, and today is marketing this zoning change with the catchphrase missing middle initiative, leading many to equate this somehow with housing affordability for the middle class. If adopted, this proposal negates any input from citizens as individuals and negates the work of community associations regarding community planning and zoning in neighborhoods. This missing middle notion clearly would abrogate the responsibility of elected councillors to represent citizens and community needs and would delegate unilateral authority to staff in the city with no recourse for or no notice to residents or neighborhoods. We have seen in recent times heavy densification of our downtown core. Numerous large high-rises, condos, and more are being built as we speak. If this proposal goes ahead, we will see heavy densification in our traditional residential neighborhoods. And let me tell you, densification has already occurred and continues to occur. Our street has duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and a myriad of basement suites, garden suites, and R1S1 zoning. And we are no different than most traditional residential neighborhoods in Victoria. Clearly, council does not know or understand how much residential infilling has occurred under current zoning. So why do this? And who really benefits at the end? Not the community, not citizens, but developers, speculators, and others who will make profits while densifying our neighborhoods.
Wow. It sounds like Steve Orchardson, much to my surprise, is going to speak for the average Victorian. I don't know what an average Victorian is anymore. We'll see. According to what he's been saying lately, would be a great addition to council. I think we need a little bit of experience on some of these council seats that are making decisions on such massive budgets. We certainly wish him luck. Robin, unfortunately, it's now time to say goodbye. And a giant thank you to all of our viewers. A ton of them watch, a ton of them comment, and this is how you can do that. We've got a Facebook page. We have a Twitter page. We have a YouTube page. We have a Facebook group in which you can encourage your comments. You can post your events. We're also on Instagram, and we are also on TikTok if you want to have a bunch of fun. And increasingly, more and more people are using those platforms to voice their opinions. So, once again, sadly, the show ends. I have so much fun with you, Robin. I am the Croatian sensation, the mayor of North Tulip. My name is John Jurisic.
And after that long title, I just remain your humble servant, Robin Adair, and rumble on!